Have you ever felt like you're not being appreciated for who you are, simply because of your age? Have you ever stayed in a relationship because you thought you had to prove something to someone who couldn't see beyond the surface? If so, this story may change the way you think about love, dignity, and self-worth. In this video, we're diving into the life of a man who, at 70 years old, found himself caught in a relationship with a woman half his age, only to discover that true love has nothing to do with trying to reclaim youth or seeking approval. Through his journey, you'll witness a powerful transformation, from humiliation to self-empowerment. Why should you keep watching? This story is not just about one man's experience. It's about a universal lesson in self-love, respect, and the courage to walk away when a relationship no longer serves you. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to reclaim your dignity and self-worth after being mistreated or undervalued, this video will provide answers. Stick with us to learn 5 life-changing lessons that could help you or someone you know navigate similar struggles. This video isn't just for those in relationships. It's for anyone who has ever felt the weight of societal pressure or judgment based on age, appearance, or circumstance. By the end, you'll understand why loving yourself, accepting your age, and standing up for your dignity are the greatest acts of self-respect you can show. So, stay with us till the end, because this story may just inspire you to make the most important decision of your life, one that puts your peace and happiness first. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. At first, everything seemed to fall into place like a beautiful, harmonious melody. She surrounded him with words that felt like sweet caresses, showering him with praise, admiration, and an overwhelming sense of compassion. In her presence, he felt alive again, strong, powerful, and virile, rediscovering a vitality he had long since abandoned. Every touch from her was electric, every glance an unspoken promise. She had a way of drawing him in, of making him feel desired in a way he hadn't experienced in years. He was enchanted by her, captivated by the way she made him feel like he was the center of her world, and in turn, he did everything within his power to please her, to make her feel like royalty. But gradually, something shifted, though he didn't immediately notice it. Her admiration became tinged with subtle demands, veiled in the guise of care and concern. The same woman who once worshipped him now began to speak with an air of superiority, as if she were the one on a pedestal and he, somehow, had slipped. What she passed off as attraction was increasingly laced with condescension, and he, blinded by his desire to keep her love, didn't see the insidious transformation unfolding. She started pointing out the things she once overlooked as if they were glaring flaws. She suggested he take better care of himself, stating that young men his age shouldn't have such limitations. Her words, at first, felt like a gentle nudge, a playful comment, but as they continued, they carried an edge. He tried to laugh it off, convinced that it was just her way of teasing, a joke shared between lovers. But the laughter began to feel hollow, the frequency of her remarks weighing on him, making his once confident smile falter. And then, it escalated. She started telling him, coldly, matter-of-factly, that he was too old for her, too old to satisfy her, to be the man she deserved. Her words, sharp and cutting, pierced his heart. Each criticism felt like a dagger, stripping away the fragile layers of his self-worth. And the final blow came when she turned her attention to their most intimate moments. He had always prided himself on his ability to offer more than just physical pleasure. He believed that love and emotional connection were the true marks of a fulfilling relationship. But now, she was relentless. She dismissed his every effort, reducing him to nothing more than his physical limitations. She told him that he was too slow, too predictable, that he could never satisfy her in the way a younger man could. Her words stung deeply, a brutal reminder of the things he feared most, the passage of time, the loss of his youthful vigor. He tried to defend himself, to explain that age was no barrier to passion, that true satisfaction came from the emotional connection they shared, the tender care he could offer in ways a younger man might not even understand. He spoke with a fervor and conviction that burned from within, his words spilling out like a desperate plea for understanding. But even as he spoke, he couldn't escape the nagging doubt that maybe, just maybe, she was right, that perhaps he had grown too old, too slow, too unworthy of her. His heart ached with the realization that no matter how much he tried to prove himself, she was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Instead of honoring him, she ridiculed his every effort, dismissing what she perceived as the desperate, futile attempts of an aging man desperately clinging to some semblance of relevance. Her mockery wasn't just an insult. It was a gut-wrenching blow that shattered his heart into countless fragile pieces. Each word she uttered felt like a dagger aimed straight at his soul, and yet, despite the overwhelming tide of humiliation crashing against him, he clung to the flickering hope that this was just some cruel test of his patience and endurance. He convinced himself, though barely, that with time, understanding, and compassion, she would come to recognize the depth of his devotion, the sincerity of his intentions, and the quiet strength that had been built over decades of living. Yet, every word she spoke only pushed him further into the abyss of self-doubt. He began to see himself through her eyes, not as the man he once was, full of potential and wisdom, but as a useless relic, a person without worth, adrift in the current of her indifference. To an outsider, it might seem almost absurd to condemn his decision to stay. After all, what could justify subjecting oneself to such cruelty, to the constant erosion of one's self-esteem? But for anyone who has lived through the long and tumultuous years of a life filled with both joy and suffering, the answer is painfully clear. Love, in its most consuming and agonizing form, has a way of ensnaring even the most resolute hearts. It forces us into situations where we tolerate things we would never have dreamed of accepting before, because love, in its strangest paradox, makes us blind to the obvious, distorting our vision until we are willing to sacrifice our dignity just to hold on to the hope that it might one day be enough. He wasn't just bound by her youth or her beauty anymore. No, he was shackled by the relentless need to prove himself, to show her that he was still worthy of her affection, that he was not just some worn-out relic of a forgotten time. And yet, despite all his efforts, she seemed incapable of seeing the man beneath the wrinkles, beneath the silver hair, the man who had lived a life rich with experience, with the scars of battles fought and won, and with a heart capable of depths she would never know. Then came the night, one of those nights when everything finally broke. An argument, sharp and bitter, left him feeling smaller than ever before, swallowed by the weight of her words and the finality of her gaze. That night, as the shadows stretched across his weary soul, he did what he had been avoiding for so long. He gazed into the mirror, confronting the reflection of a man who had seen 70 years of life, the deep lines etched into his face, the silent testimony of a life well lived, and the eyes that held the wisdom of decades. At that moment, a profound truth pierced through the cloud of his self-loathing. He could no longer live in the shadow of someone else's approval, especially not from someone incapable of seeing him for who he truly was. He deserved more than this constant humiliation. He deserved the love and respect he had given so freely, but which she had shown him so little of. With a calm that belied the storm inside him, he made a decision that had been brewing in the silence of his suffering. He would no longer be held hostage by the whims of her disregard. He would confront her, and, with the quiet dignity he had always known, he would let her know that despite the love he still felt for her, he could no longer endure this degradation. He was ready to end the relationship, not out of bitterness, but out of a deep, undeniable need to preserve what little was left of his sense of worth. The decision wasn't just about love, it was about self-respect. The conversation, though unpleasant and tense, proved to be far more liberating than he could have ever imagined. It was as if, through the rawness of those difficult words and the sting of truth, he had finally uncovered a long-buried part of himself. For the first time in what seemed like years, he realized that he had been carrying the weight of someone else's expectations and desires for far too long. And now, here he was, standing in the aftermath of that painful exchange, not defeated, but reborn. The conversation had cracked open something deep within him, a realization that he wasn't fading into irrelevance or obsolescence. No, he was evolving. He wasn't showing his age in the way one might think of as frailty, withered by time or physical decline. Instead, he was embodying something far more precious, far more profound: wisdom. The wisdom that comes only with years of experience, of surviving the trials and tribulations that life throws at you, of learning to stand tall through the storms, knowing that no matter how battered or bruised you might seem on the outside, your spirit remains unbroken. He thought back to all the years he had lived, all the countless experiences that had shaped him into the person he was now. The moments of joy, of love, but also the deep moments of sorrow, regret, and pain. There were the battles fought silently, the countless struggles he had faced alone, and moments when he had doubted his strength. But here he was, still standing. Every wrinkle on his face was not a sign of weakness but of resilience, each one a testament to a life lived with purpose, to battles fought and won, to the enduring spirit that had carried him through. With every line and crease etched into his skin, he could see the story of a life that had never given up, a soul that had refused to be broken. As he stepped outside her house and felt the crispness of the air on his skin, something unexpected washed over him. It wasn't just relief, nor was it simply the absence of the tension that had hung in the air before. It was a deep sense of peace, the kind of peace that comes only when you finally realize that you have nothing more to prove to anyone, not even to yourself. The weight that had been crushing him for months, maybe even years, seemed to vanish in that instant. For the first time in so long, he felt lighter, unburdened. His heart, which had been heavy with the emotional strain of trying to fit into someone else's mold, now beat freely, without fear, without guilt, without the suffocating pressure of needing to be something he was not. He realized, with a sudden clarity, that not everyone would ever understand the true worth of what he had to offer. Not everyone would ever recognize the depth of his heart or the richness of his experiences. And that was okay. He didn't need their approval. What mattered now was the quiet knowing that he had given everything he had, and yet, he had lost himself in the process. But now, in this moment, in this revelation, he understood. Losing himself to another had not been an act of love, but of self-sacrifice that had robbed him of his dignity, his peace, his very essence. As he reflected on the years he had spent in that relationship, the sacrifices he had made, and the pieces of himself he had surrendered, it all became painfully clear. He had submitted, not out of true love, but out of a misguided belief that by giving up parts of himself, he could somehow be more worthy of someone else's affection. He had convinced himself that by molding himself to meet her needs, he would find fulfillment, but in truth, it had only led him down a path of self-doubt, of losing sight of who he truly was. Yet, as the realization settled in, so did the overwhelming sense of freedom. By letting go, by finally releasing himself from the emotional chains that had bound him, he had regained what he thought he had lost forever: his dignity, his self-respect, and the most precious thing of all, his peace. In that release, he had discovered something he had longed for without even knowing it: the love that could only come from within. He could offer it to no one else, for it was his alone to give. And in embracing that self-love, he finally understood what it meant to be whole. The days that followed were filled with a profound sense of loneliness, but it was a different kind of loneliness. It wasn't the suffocating, gnawing ache of feeling abandoned, nor was it the desperate longing for validation or affection from someone else. No, this loneliness was pure, untainted by the need for external validation. It was a loneliness that was free of judgment, free of expectations, free of the weight of proving himself to anyone, even to the mirror he had once scrutinized himself in. This was a clean, dignified loneliness, the kind that comes when you've stopped trying to live up to someone else's standards and started living up to your own. It was the loneliness of a man who had finally come to terms with himself, who had embraced his flaws, his scars, and his imperfections as integral parts of who he was. It was the kind of loneliness that breeds strength, self-awareness, and an undeniable sense of purpose. And in this new chapter of solitude, he came to a powerful realization. Even without her, even without anyone else, he was still a man of worth. A man whose life was rich with meaning, whose character was forged through struggle and perseverance. He wasn't defined by his relationships, nor by his failures or successes. He was defined by the quiet integrity with which he carried himself. He had learned, through all the pain and all the joy, that love wasn't something to be sought in another person. It was something to be cultivated within. And as he began to nurture that self-love, it became the foundation upon which he could rebuild, stronger and more grounded than ever before. The loneliness, though painful at times, became a space for him to heal, to grow, and to finally become the man he had always been meant to be. There was no rush now, no need to prove anything to anyone. He had already proven to himself that he was enough. And with that realization came the power to move forward, not out of desperation, but out of quiet confidence. He was at peace with who he was, with where he had been, and with where he was going. He had freed himself from the prison of expectations and found a freedom he had never known before. The freedom to love himself fully, to embrace the life that awaited him with open arms, and to trust that no matter what came next, he would always have his own back. With that unshakable foundation, he could face whatever came his way, not with fear or hesitation, but with a heart full of peace, strength, and quiet joy. This event marked a profound transformation in his life, an awakening that would forever alter the way he viewed both love and himself. It taught him that not all young people, no matter how alluring or charming they may seem, are deserving of the privilege of holding another person's dignity in their hands. It became clear to him that true love, the kind of love that endures and transcends the ordinary, isn't born from superficiality or the fickleness of youth. Rather, true love is the kind that accepts, respects, and values each individual for who they truly are, unconditionally, without regard to physical appearance, age, or social status. This was a love that saw the whole person, imperfections and all, and still chose to stay. He had spent much of his life chasing after external validation, especially the kind that came from youthful affection, believing that only when someone younger admired him would he truly feel worthy. But the truth he learned, sometimes through painful experiences, is that worth doesn't lie in the gaze of another. It is found in the peace and contentment one feels when one looks inward and accepts oneself completely, flaws and all. True love, he discovered, is the kind that comes with mutual respect and doesn't require the erosion of one's sense of self. A few months passed after the event, and his life began to take on new meaning. He had been through the storm, and now it was time for him to feel the warmth of the sun again. Slowly, cautiously, he started to explore the things that once brought him joy, before they were buried under the weight of uncertainty and doubt. He reconnected with old friends, people who had once been his closest companions, whose laughter and shared memories had once been his constant companions. Time and distance had put miles between them, but now their bond felt as strong as ever. In their company, he remembered the simple joys of life, the joy of being present in the moment, the joy of laughter, and the comfort of knowing that true friendship doesn't fade with time. He also began visiting places he had long dreamed of seeing. For so many years, he had postponed these dreams, telling himself there was always a later, a better time. But now, with a new sense of urgency, he decided to follow through on those dreams. He traveled to new destinations, places he had once thought were far out of reach. Each new experience felt like a small victory, a quiet affirmation that he was reclaiming the pieces of his life that had been lost along the way. He rediscovered hobbies and activities that he had abandoned in favor of other people's expectations, and in doing so, he found a sense of peace and joy that he had not felt in years. The most important lesson, however, came from within. As he stood before the mirror, he no longer saw the wrinkles etched on his face with sorrow or regret. Instead, each line told a story. Every silvery strand of hair now carried with it a memory, a lifetime of moments that had shaped him, each one leaving a mark of experience. Time had not diminished him. It had matured him, giving him a deeper understanding of life's most important truths. Each wrinkle wasn't a sign of decay. It was a symbol of survival, of wisdom gained through years of living and learning. The more he looked, the more he realized that aging wasn't something to be feared or resisted. It was a privilege, a gift, for in every year that passed, he had accumulated a wealth of knowledge, wisdom about life, about love, about himself. He began to understand, more clearly than ever, that the true value of life is not defined by how others perceive you. His sense of worth wasn't dependent on the approval or admiration of anyone, least of all a younger woman whose fleeting affections were only skin-deep. He had spent so many years measuring his value against external standards, always seeking affirmation in the eyes of others. But in this quiet moment of reflection, he came to a powerful realization. His worth was something that existed independently of anyone else's opinion. It was a quiet knowing that when he looked at himself, he saw a man who had lived a full, rich life, who had learned from his mistakes and celebrated his victories. His life was complete, not because of what others saw in him, but because of the peace he now carried within. This was the lesson that time had taught him. Aging brings wisdom, the kind of wisdom that helps us know what truly matters. It isn't about chasing after the fleeting and superficial pleasures of youth. It's about finding a deep, abiding satisfaction in simply being who you are, without apology, without the need for approval. He had no longer any desire to sacrifice his dignity just to please others or to seek approval from anyone. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Instead, he found that his greatest fulfillment came from the quiet satisfaction of living according to his principles. He was content in his skin, proud of who he had become. This story serves as an important reminder to those who are older and may find themselves struggling with feelings of self-doubt, wondering if they have missed their chance at love or happiness. It reminds them that while the desire for love is deeply human, it must never come at the cost of inner serenity or self-respect. He had once thought that to be loved, he needed to fit a certain mold, to meet a certain expectation. But over time, he learned that love, the kind that truly matters, is rooted in acceptance and self-love, the kind of love that comes from within, that doesn't require changing yourself or sacrificing your dignity to make someone else happy. When he looked back at his past relationship, he saw it for what it truly was, a lesson. It had been an opportunity to learn about acceptance, not just of others, but of himself. He had learned that to be loved by someone else, you must first love yourself completely, with all your flaws, your imperfections, your strength, and your vulnerability. Only then can you open your heart to another, knowing that love isn't about validation or approval, but about sharing and growing together. For him, ending the relationship was not a sign of defeat, but a moment of empowerment. It was his choice to reclaim his identity, to rediscover who he was beyond the external expectations of others. It was a chance to start living for himself, and to finally put his own needs and happiness above the needs of someone who had never truly valued him for who he was. For many, his story has become an example of what it means to embrace self-love. It's a story of someone who faced the heartache and loss that often comes with aging, but who found a way to emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more at peace with who they are. It's a powerful reminder that even when everything around us seems to conspire against our confidence, even when society tells us we are too old, too slow, too anything to be valuable, we must hold on to the truth of who we are. We must never let go of our dignity, our self-respect, and our own personal peace. His story serves as a beacon of hope for others who may feel lost or unsure of their place in the world. It tells us that love, in its truest form, will come when we love ourselves first, and that the peace and contentment we seek cannot be found in the approval of others, but in the quiet, steadfast embrace of our own identity. And that, in the end, is the greatest lesson of all. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. This film is more than just a story. It's a powerful, heart-wrenching reminder that it speaks most profoundly to those who have lived long enough to truly understand the invaluable essence of dignity. Older individuals, seasoned by the passage of time, are the ones who comprehend, in the deepest corners of their hearts, that the worth of a person is never truly defined by the number of years they've lived, but rather by the integrity and strength they summon in the face of life's most demanding struggles. It's not age or appearance that marks us, it is the fire of character, the steadfastness of our spirit in the face of hardship. And in this journey, it is our integrity that becomes our most powerful testament, transforming every wrinkle and every gray strand of hair into something far greater than just physical signs of aging. These lines etched upon our skin are not a symbol of fading youth. They are a declaration of the wisdom and life experiences that shape us into who we are. They represent the battles fought, the lessons learned, and the triumphs achieved in overcoming life's harshest adversities. As we age, we accumulate wisdom, not in the abstract sense, but in the real, lived experience of surviving, of persevering, of continuing on even when the world around us may seem to lose its vitality. These signs of age, our wrinkles, our gray hairs, are not markers of weakness, but rather badges of honor, each one representing a story of resilience, of emotional endurance, and of the inner strength to face whatever comes our way. It is this unwavering sense of self, this integrity, that is the true measure of our worth. It is what gives our lives meaning, and it turns each wrinkle into a radiant emblem of our personal history. A history built not just on surviving, but on thriving despite all odds. Through this lens, we come to see that age does not diminish us. It strengthens and refines us, giving us the capacity to understand ourselves and the world in ways that only time can provide. From this poignant narrative, I want to offer 5 crucial lessons that I believe hold particular significance for older individuals, especially those who may be struggling with relationships in their later years. These lessons are born from the powerful themes woven throughout the story, and they are intended to provide clarity and wisdom for anyone navigating the complexities of relationships later in life. The first lesson, perhaps the most important, is this. While it may be deeply tempting to seek out a connection with someone younger, in the hopes of rekindling the excitement, the passion, and the vitality of youth, it is absolutely essential to remain grounded in the reality of who you are and what you truly deserve. The allure of trying to recapture the glory of youth, of feeling young again through the admiration of someone younger, is powerful, and it's a temptation that many of us can easily fall prey to. But in doing so, we risk losing sight of ourselves, of our true needs and desires, in a pursuit of an illusion. The character in the film, driven by the desire to feel valued and validated, ends up pouring his time, his energy, and his emotions into someone who not only fails to see him for who he really is, but who takes advantage of his vulnerability. In his quest to prove that he is still capable, still vibrant, and still worthy of love, he unwittingly surrenders his dignity, accepting behavior and treatment he would never have allowed earlier in life. This is where the trap lies. When we desperately seek validation, we can become so consumed by the need to prove something to ourselves or to others that we forget to honor our own worth. The desire to feel relevant, to show that we still have value, can cloud our judgment, and we can end up sacrificing our peace of mind, our self-respect, and even our happiness. The truth is, love should never be a battleground for validation, nor should it be a place where we feel the need to constantly prove ourselves. Love, in its purest form, is meant to be an environment where mutual respect, understanding, and acceptance flourish. It should be a space where both individuals honor each other's dignity and acknowledge each other's worth without the need for external validation. The character in the story thought, in his naivete, that enduring criticism and humiliation in the name of love was somehow a noble act, a sacrifice worthy of admiration. But the painful reality is that he was sacrificing something far more precious, his own dignity. He mistook tolerance for strength, believing that accepting mistreatment was a demonstration of selflessness. But in truth, he was eroding the very foundation of his own self-worth. Loving oneself, truly and deeply, must come before loving anyone else. If we cannot honor ourselves, if we cannot recognize our own value, then we open ourselves up to the possibility of being mistreated and disrespected. To lose sight of our own dignity is to expose ourselves to the contempt of others. This lesson cannot be overstated. Before we can give ourselves fully to someone else, we must first commit to loving ourselves, with all our flaws, our imperfections, and our history. It is only by understanding our own worth that we can create space for healthy, thriving relationships. We must recognize that we deserve love, respect, and kindness, not because we are trying to prove anything, but simply because we are human beings deserving of dignity. To deny ourselves this is to accept a life of emotional neglect, a life in which we allow others to determine our value. In the end, recognizing our own worth is the first step towards creating a relationship that is healthy, nurturing, and fulfilling. It is the foundation upon which we build our connections with others. When we know that we are worthy of respect and love, we stop settling for less. We stop allowing ourselves to be disrespected or mistreated. Instead, we set boundaries, and we insist on being treated with the same love and kindness that we are ready to give in return. Only then can we experience the kind of love that uplifts, strengthens, and nurtures the soul. As we move through life, let us never forget that our dignity is not negotiable. It is not something we can trade for fleeting moments of affection or validation. Our dignity is the most precious gift we possess, and it is something that should be safeguarded above all else. When we learn to cherish and protect our own worth, we create the possibility for true, lasting love. Love that is based on mutual respect, understanding, and the recognition that we are all worthy of kindness and care, no matter our age. The final lesson he came to understand was one of immense courage. A courage not only to say enough, but to accept that loneliness, when embraced intentionally, could become a form of peace. A peace that wasn't born from the absence of others, but from the quiet space of solitude where one could truly hear their own heart, heal, and rebuild. When he decided to end the relationship, it was more than just the painful severing of ties. It was a soul-deep act of rehabilitation, a reclaiming of himself. It was a choice that spoke to a resilience he hadn't known he possessed. The decision to step away, to choose solitude over the suffocating presence of humiliation, was not a weakness, but a profound statement of inner strength. It was a strength forged in the fires of pain and uncertainty, a strength that refused to accept a life that diminished him. In that moment, he recognized that sometimes the bravest thing one can do is walk away. Walk away from situations, from people, from circumstances that no longer serve your growth. And in that walk, one can discover something far more valuable than external validation: self-respect. Solitude, he found, wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity, a sanctuary where he could confront his own vulnerabilities and reconstruct his sense of self-worth, free from the toxic forces that had once consumed him. The pain of loneliness was, in fact, the pain of liberation. It was the painful, yet necessary, birth of a stronger, more self-aware version of himself. This choice wasn't easy, nor was it quick. It required the kind of raw, emotional strength that most people shy away from. But it was the path that led to his healing. And in his solitude, he gave himself the space to find something he had long been searching for: inner peace. It was a peace that no one could take from him, a peace that came not from the external, fleeting joys of life, but from deep within. It was the peace that comes only when you stop running from yourself, when you stop compromising who you are to meet someone else's expectations. This peace, once found, became his refuge. It became his compass, guiding him through the storms of doubt and fear that life would inevitably throw his way. This internal peace was not an escape from reality, but a return to it, a return to himself. It was in this peace that he learned to value his own company, to find contentment in the quiet moments, and to embrace the space to grow. This was his greatest victory, not over the world or anyone else, but over his own fears and insecurities. It was in this hard-won peace that he discovered the true strength of being alone. And in that solitude, he became whole again, more than just a survivor of past heartbreaks, but someone who had emerged stronger and wiser. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The fourth lesson, one that deepened as he grew older, was the realization that age, far from being something to fear or resent, was a treasure trove of invaluable experiences and memories. Time, with all its changes, had not diminished him. It had enriched him. Every wrinkle etched into his skin, every gray hair that now peppered his head, were not marks of decline but evidence of a life lived fully, with depth and meaning. These outward signs of aging were not to be feared or hidden, but embraced as symbols of wisdom, strength, and the beauty of lived experience. He had learned that, unlike youth, which was fleeting and often superficial, age brought with it the kind of wisdom that could not be bought or manufactured. He understood that true beauty was not in the perfection of a youthful face or a body that had not yet been touched by time. True beauty was in the lines of a face that had laughed, cried, and weathered the storms of life. It was in the eyes that had seen the world for what it was and had learned to find joy in its imperfections. Time, he realized, had gifted him a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. His life was no longer defined by the narrow standards of youth and beauty that society often revered. Instead, it was defined by something far more enduring: the richness of lived experience, the depth of knowledge gained through hardship, and the inner peace that only time can bring. In this realization, he found a profound freedom. He no longer felt the need to conform to the societal expectations of eternal youth. He no longer sought the approval of others, especially from those who failed to understand the value of his journey. He no longer sought to please anyone who could not appreciate the depth of his character, his life, and the lessons he had learned. Those who only sought the superficial, the transient, would never truly understand the value of accumulated wisdom. They were trapped in a cycle of surface-level judgment, missing out on the treasures that come with age, experience, and emotional growth. He understood that trying to please those who could not see his true worth was futile. It was a waste of energy to seek approval from people who were blind to the complexities of who he was, to the depths of his soul. His true value was not in what others thought of him, but in how he viewed himself, how he had come to appreciate the wisdom he had gained, the strength he had built, and the peace he had found in his own company. He also came to understand that true affection and love were not about grand displays or shallow gestures. Love, real love, was shown in the quiet attentiveness to a partner's needs, in the simple moments of connection, in the physical closeness that said, "I see you, I hear you, I care for you." Even though his body no longer had the same vitality as in his youth, he had learned that love was not confined to physical vigor alone. His love could be expressed in other, more meaningful ways, through a gentle touch, through words of comfort, through moments of shared silence that spoke volumes. He realized that the most profound expressions of love were often the quietest ones, the ones that asked for nothing in return, that simply offered everything. Love, when truly understood, was about giving without expectation, about putting the needs of your partner before your own pride or ego. But he also knew that for love to thrive, respect was essential. Respect was the bedrock on which all true connections were built. Offering closeness, offering affection, should never be seen as an obligation, nor should it be a source of shame. It should be an act of love, freely given, with no strings attached, and with the understanding that it is always mutual. True intimacy was about equality, mutual respect, and the freedom to be vulnerable without fear of judgment. This understanding became the foundation of his relationships moving forward. Relationships not built on the fragile, fleeting things of youth, but on the enduring strength of love, respect, and shared wisdom. It was a love that was no longer about proving anything, but about simply being there for each other, supporting each other through life's challenges, and growing together in mutual understanding. It was a love that would last, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, grounded in truth, and built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and affection. As we reflect on the lessons shared today, we've explored the power of choosing self-respect over staying in unhealthy situations, the wisdom that comes with age, and the quiet strength of being alone to rebuild and grow. We've seen how true love isn't about grand gestures, but about respect, understanding, and a willingness to prioritize the needs of others. These are lessons that touch the core of who we are, and they offer valuable insights that can truly transform the way we live our lives. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from this journey? Is there one particular lesson that stood out to you the most? What is something you will take from this and start practicing in your own life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insights and content that can help you grow and live a more fulfilled life. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.